$300,000 disappeared from my husband's account, not into a casino, not into a business, and not into some secret apartment for a mistress. It went to my mother, the woman who had spent years telling me to stay quiet, to endure, and not to destroy my family over suspicions. And when I saw that transfer, I felt something terrifying for the first time. In my marriage, it was not just two people lying. Everyone was lying. Hi, my name is Rachel Miller. I am 37 years old, and I live in a suburb of Phoenix, Arizona. Until that night, I thought my greatest fear was finding out my husband was cheating on me. Now I know there is something far worse. Realizing your own mother helped him hide it. I had been married to Daniel for 11 years. From the outside, our life looked almost perfect. A beautiful house with a pool, 2 cars in the garage, yearly Christmas photos in matching sweaters, and a joint bank account I barely ever checked. Daniel worked in private investments, always wore expensive suits, and spoke with such confidence that people believed him before he even explained anything. My mother, Elaine, adored him from the first day. She said I was lucky because men like him did not grow on trees. Even when he missed our dinners, came home after midnight, and blamed everything on client meetings, she found excuses for him. When I smelled another woman's perfume on his shirt, Mom convinced me it was the office, an elevator, or a restaurant. Her calmness always did something strange to me. Instead of support, I felt ashamed of my own doubts. The first real warning sign came in the spring. Daniel went to a conference in Denver, but his phone accidentally showed his location in San Diego. I took a screenshot, but I did not tell anyone. The next day, Mom showed up without warning with a lemon pie and told me I needed to spend less time on my phone. She could not have known about the location. At least, that was what I thought then. After that, the coincidences started forming an ugly pattern. Every time I questioned Daniel, Mom somehow appeared nearby. She called at the exact moment I was about to check his suitcase. She invited me for coffee when I planned to drive to his office. She asked for help with her insurance on the same evening. He disappeared again without explanation. For a long time, I convinced myself it was just family attachment. Mom was a widow. She lived alone in a small house in Mesa and often said Daniel had become almost like a son to her. I even felt guilty for being jealous of her relationship with my own husband. But there was something too precise about her concern. She was not just calming me down. She was stopping me. That evening, everything began with an email from the bank. Daniel had left his laptop open on the kitchen island because he was rushing to another late meeting. I was not planning to spy. I simply saw the message about a large transfer and first thought it had to be a mistake. The amount was so absurd that my mind did not accept it right away. $300,000. Recipient, Elaine Whitmore, my mother. In the payment note, there were only 2 words. Final agreement. I read the line again and again while the kitchen around me turned cold and unfamiliar. We had no shared business with my mother. She had not sold us a house. She had not lent us money. There was no reason for her to receive that kind of money from my husband. The next morning, she arrived before I even had time to call her. She was holding a pie, but her fingers were shaking so badly that the box was crushed around the edges. Her face was pale, as if she already knew what I had seen. And that was when I noticed the thin gold bracelet on her wrist. The same bracelet that had disappeared from my jewelry box 3 years earlier. For 3 years, I had blamed myself for losing that bracelet. It had belonged to my grandmother, and my mother knew that. She knew I kept it in the small velvet box under my winter scarves. She knew I only wore it on birthdays, anniversaries, and days when I missed the women in my family who were gone. So when it disappeared, I cried quietly in my closet and told myself I must have misplaced it. But there it was, resting on my mother's wrist like a confession. She noticed my eyes drop to it almost immediately. Her hand moved toward her sleeve, slow and nervous, but it was too late. Something passed across her face that I had never seen before. Not guilt exactly. Something colder than guilt. The fear of being recognized. I did not ask about the bracelet right away. I could barely breathe, and I knew one wrong question would make her vanish behind the same soft voice she had used for years. The voice that made me feel dramatic. The voice that turned every red flag into my personal weakness. She placed the pie on my kitchen counter, right beside Daniel's laptop. The screen was closed now, but I could still see the transfer in my mind. The number had burned itself behind my eyes. $300,000. Final agreement. My mother's name. She began talking about ordinary things, as if ordinary words could cover the smell of smoke. She mentioned the heat, her neighbor's dog, the grocery prices at Safeway. Her voice kept moving, but her eyes would not stay still. They drifted toward the hallway, then the stairs, then the closed laptop. I realized then that she was not surprised. She had come because she knew I had found something. That thought made my stomach tighten harder than the transfer itself. Daniel had not warned her in the morning. He had left before sunrise, claiming an emergency meeting in Scottsdale. So either he contacted her after I saw the email, or she had another way of knowing. A small, sickening memory rose inside me. 2 months earlier, I had found my mother alone in my bedroom. She said she was looking for aspirin because she felt dizzy. At the time, I believed her. I even brought her water and helped her sit down. But now I remembered the open drawer near my nightstand. The charging cable moved from its usual place. My old iPad lying face down on the bed. That iPad was connected to my messages. It was also connected to our family cloud. For a moment, the kitchen seemed to tilt beneath me. I wondered how long she had been watching me. How many private texts had she read? How many times I had cried to my sister in messages, only for my mother to already know every word. The worst part was not even the spying. It was how perfectly she had used it. When I told my sister I might follow Daniel, Mom called with chest pain. When I searched divorce attorneys online, Daniel suddenly became gentle for 2 weeks. When I wrote that I felt trapped, Mom showed up with old photo albums and stories about marriage being work. Nothing had been random. I looked at her bracelet again, and another memory surfaced. Daniel had bought my silence with apologies before. Expensive dinners, sudden vacations, jewelry I never asked for. But my mother did not need romance. She needed security. She needed money. And apparently, he had found her price. That afternoon, I did something I had never done before. I pretended to believe her. I let her talk. I let her smooth my hair like I was still 16. I let her remind me that families survive hard seasons when women stay calm. My mouth stayed quiet, but inside, something old and obedient began breaking apart. After she left, I did not call Daniel. I went upstairs, locked the bedroom door, and opened the old iPad. My hands shook so badly that I mistyped the passcode twice. When it finally unlocked, the battery warning flashed across the screen. Then a notification appeared from an email account I did not recognize. The subject line had my mother's initials. And below it were the words, "Rachel is asking questions again." The email was sent at 11:47 the night before. That was the exact minute I had been standing in the kitchen, staring at Daniel's laptop and trying to understand why my husband had sent my mother enough money to buy a small house. I remembered the hum of the refrigerator, the cold tile under my feet, the way my hands went numb around the edge of the counter. While I was discovering the transfer, someone was already reporting on me. The sender's name was not a name at all. It was a string of letters and numbers, the kind people use when they do not want to be found. But the message was short enough to make my skin prickle. Rachel is asking questions again. She saw something. You need to handle this before Friday. Before Friday. I sat on the edge of my bed and read those words until they stopped looking like words. My first thought was Daniel. My second thought was my mother. My third thought was much worse. There was someone else. I opened the inbox and dozens of old emails appeared. Some were from months ago. Some went back more than a year. None of them used real names, but they all circled around me like I was a problem to be managed. There were notes about my moods, my doubts, my calls to my sister, even the morning I sat in my car outside Daniel's office and cried because I could not make myself go inside. One email mentioned my blue dress. Another mentioned the hotel receipt I found in Daniel's jacket. A third said I was becoming unstable and needed to be redirected toward my mother. That word stayed with me. Redirected. Not comforted. Not protected. Redirected. I realized my mother had not simply been defending Daniel. She had been part of a system. Every time I got close to the truth, she stepped in with exactly the right kind of guilt. She knew which wound to press. She knew I feared ending up alone. She knew I still carried shame from my first failed engagement. She knew I wanted to be the kind of woman who did not give up too easily. And she used all of it. For the first time in my life, I did not feel sad about her betrayal. I felt watched, studied, trained. I clicked through the emails carefully, afraid one wrong move would delete something important. Most of them were vague, but one had an attachment. It was labeled with a date from almost 3 years earlier, around the same week my bracelet disappeared. My mouth went dry before I even opened it. The attachment was a photo. It showed Daniel sitting at an outdoor restaurant in La Jolla, wearing the navy jacket he claimed he hated because it made him look too formal. Across from him sat a woman with dark hair, large sunglasses, and one hand resting on the table between them. On her wrist was my grandmother's bracelet. At first, I thought my mother had been wearing it there. I even leaned closer, trying to make the face match hers. But the woman was younger, thinner, striking in a quiet, expensive way. She looked comfortable beside my husband. Not nervous, not hidden, comfortable. Then I saw the caption below the photo. Proof of meeting received. Elaine confirmed Rachel will not investigate. I had to put the iPad down. My chest felt too tight, and the room suddenly seemed smaller than it had ever been. I had expected an affair. In some broken place inside me, I had been preparing for that for years. But this was different. My mother had not only known about another woman. She had confirmed that I would stay blind. And the bracelet had not been stolen for money. It had been used. Maybe as a gift. Maybe as proof. Maybe as a little cruel joke I was never meant to understand. I saved screenshots to 3 different places and sent copies to an email Daniel did not know existed. Then I checked the family cloud settings and found a shared device I had never seen before. It was listed simply as kitchen iPad, but the location showed an address in Tempe. Not my house. Not my mother's house. I copied the address by hand because I did not trust the device anymore. My fingers were shaking, but my mind had gone strangely calm. That calm scared me more than panic. It felt like the part of me that used to beg for explanations had finally walked out of the room. Downstairs, the front door opened. Daniel was home early. I closed the iPad, slipped it under the mattress, and looked at my reflection in the dark bedroom window. My face looked pale, but my eyes looked different. Less confused. More awake. Then my phone buzzed once. It was a message from my mother. Do not go to Tempe. My mother's message did not scare me because of what it said. It scared me because of what it proved. She knew I had seen the address. She knew I was holding the iPad. She knew I was close enough to touch whatever they had buried in Tempe. And the only way she could know that quickly was if someone was still watching me in real time. I did not answer her. Downstairs, Daniel moved through the kitchen with the calm rhythm of a man entering his own kingdom. Keys on the counter. Refrigerator door opening. Ice falling into a glass. Every sound felt too normal, and that made it worse. My husband was making himself a drink while my entire life was coming apart upstairs. I wiped my face, tucked the iPad deeper under the mattress, and forced myself to breathe slower. Panic would make me careless. Anger would make me loud. For the first time, I understood that the truth was not hiding behind one door. It was spread across accounts, devices, people, and money. When I came downstairs, Daniel looked at me for half a second too long. Not lovingly. Not worried. Measuring. His eyes moved over my face, my hands, my pockets. He was looking for signs, and I gave him none. I asked about his meeting, smiled at the wrong moments, and listened while he explained traffic on the 101 like I had not just discovered a secret address tied to our family cloud. That night, I did not sleep beside him. I lay still in the dark, counting his breaths and waiting for them to deepen. Around 2 in the morning, he got up quietly. The mattress lifted, the floor creaked once, and the bathroom light came on. I kept my eyes closed, but my whole body was awake. He was not using the bathroom. He was checking my side of the closet. A few minutes later, he walked back to bed, smelling faintly of mouthwash and fear. That smell stayed with me. Not because fear has a scent, exactly, but because men like Daniel only become careful when they think control is slipping. At dawn, I did something reckless. I left my phone at home, took my old Toyota instead of the SUV, and drove to Tempe with printed directions tucked under my thigh. I wore sunglasses, no makeup, and a baseball cap I had not touched in years. It felt ridiculous until I pulled onto a quiet street lined with stucco townhomes and saw Daniel's black Mercedes parked behind a tan building. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. The address belonged to a private medical office. Not a hotel. Not an apartment. Not a lawyer's suite. The sign near the entrance was small and tasteful, the kind made for people who paid cash and did not want questions. Women's wellness and family care. For several minutes, I sat in the car and watched the door. A pregnant woman came out first, holding a folder against her chest. Then a nurse in navy scrubs stepped outside and locked a side gate. Nothing looked criminal. Nothing looked dramatic. That almost made me leave. Then my mother arrived. She parked 2 spaces from Daniel's car and stayed inside for a moment, gripping the wheel. She looked older through the windshield. Smaller. But when she got out, she had that same careful face she used at church, at family dinners, and beside my hospital bed after my miscarriage 6 years earlier. The memory hit me so hard I almost forgot to breathe. 6 years earlier, I lost a baby at 10 weeks. Daniel cried in the hallway, my mother cried beside me, and I was too broken to notice how often they stepped outside together. After that, Daniel said we should stop trying for a while. Mom said maybe my body needed rest. I believed them both because grief made me easy to guide. My stomach turned cold. I waited until they disappeared inside, then walked to the entrance like someone else was moving my legs. The receptionist smiled politely until I said Daniel Miller's name. Her face changed just enough. Not much. Just enough to tell me I was not the first woman to ask. On the counter near her computer sat a clipboard. I saw only one line before she gently turned it away. Emergency contact, Elaine Whitmore. Patient name, Ava Miller. Miller. My married name. For a moment, the room blurred at the edges. I had no daughter named Ava. Daniel and I had no children. My mother had no granddaughter by that name. And yet there it was, written in blue ink inside a medical office, where my husband's car and my mother's car were both parked. That was the moment my mind finally said it clearly. This was insane. Not cheating. Not just money. Not just silence bought with $300,000. Something much bigger had grown behind my back while I was busy blaming myself for being suspicious. I walked back to my car before anyone could ask me to leave. My legs felt hollow and my mouth tasted like metal. Across the parking lot, Daniel stepped out of the side door with a woman in dark sunglasses. The same woman from the La Jolla photo. She was holding a toddler on her hip. And around the little girl's wrist, shining in the Arizona sun, was my grandmother's gold bracelet. Seeing that bracelet on the little girl's wrist changed something in me. Not because it proved Daniel had a child. Not even because my mother had known. It changed me because the child was wearing something that had belonged to the women in my family, as if my own history had been taken from me and placed gently around another life. I sat in the Toyota until my hands stopped shaking enough to drive. Daniel did not see me. My mother did not see me. The woman in sunglasses carried Ava toward Daniel's Mercedes, while my mother walked beside them like a grandmother leaving a birthday party. That image almost broke me. For years, I had carried the grief of not becoming a mother. I had listened to Daniel say we needed time. I had listened to my mother say some losses were meant to teach women acceptance. Meanwhile, they had built another version of a family close enough for me to drive there in 40 minutes. On the way home, I did not cry. Tears would have made it feel simple, and nothing about this was simple anymore. I stopped at a FedEx store, printed every screenshot, and made 2 copies of everything. The emails. The transfer. The family cloud device. The photo from La Jolla. The Tempe address. The payment note that still made my stomach twist. Final agreement. By noon, I was sitting in a parking lot behind a law office in downtown Phoenix. I found the attorney through a search Daniel would never see, using a phone I bought with cash from a pharmacy. I did not feel clever. I felt like a woman finally learning how not to leave footprints inside her own cage. The attorney's office smelled like coffee, paper, and cold air conditioning. I handed over the folder with my evidence and watched her expression change page by page. She had probably seen affairs, hidden accounts, secret children, and cruel spouses before. Still, when she reached the email about redirecting me toward my mother, her face became very still. That stillness told me more than sympathy could have. She explained that I needed to protect myself before confronting anyone. Financial records, personal documents, tax returns, property paperwork, passwords, separate accounts. A safe place to stay. Not dramatic. Not emotional. Just practical steps, stacked carefully like stones across a flooded road. For the first time in weeks, I felt a thin line of ground under my feet. When I got home, Daniel's SUV was gone, but my mother's car sat in the driveway. She was inside my kitchen, washing a plate she had no reason to touch. The lemon pie sat on the counter again, untouched and perfect. For a second, I wondered how many women in America had been taught to fear messy truth more than clean lies. She turned when I walked in, and her eyes dropped to the folder in my hand. I did not ask questions yet. Questions gave liars room to decorate the truth. Instead, I placed the folder on the table and watched her look at the printed transfer. Her face folded inward, like the money itself had become shame. She tried to reach for my hand, but I stepped back. That small movement hurt more than I expected. She was still my mother. The same woman who brushed my hair before school, sat through my dance recitals, and taught me how to make soup when I had the flu. But she was also the woman who had watched me doubt my sanity while she collected money for my silence. Something inside her seemed to collapse without a sound. She did not confess everything. Not then. People like my mother did not open doors all at once. They cracked them just enough to make you feel guilty for pushing harder. She admitted only that Daniel had been seeing the woman for years. She admitted Ava existed. She admitted the money was meant to help her start over after my marriage inevitably became public. But her words felt rehearsed. There was more. I knew it because she avoided one thing completely. She never explained the medical office. She never explained why she was listed as Ava's emergency contact. Most of all, she never explained why a 3-year-old child had my grandmother's bracelet. After she left, I went straight to our bedroom safe. Daniel kept old tax files there, passports, insurance papers, and a small metal box he claimed contained business documents. I had never opened it because I had trusted him with the boring parts of our life. That trust now felt almost embarrassing. The key was taped behind the bottom drawer of his nightstand. Inside the metal box were birth records, trust documents, and a sealed envelope from a fertility clinic in Nevada. My name was printed across the front in black letters. Rachel Miller. I opened it with numb fingers and found a consent form dated 2 months after my miscarriage. At the bottom of the page was my signature. Only I had never signed it. The signature looked like mine at first glance. That was the part that made my stomach turn. The loop in the R, the slight slant in Miller, even the careless way I usually cross the T in my middle name. Whoever had signed that form had studied me. Not guessed. Studied. I sat on the floor beside the safe with the paper trembling in my hands, and for several minutes I could not understand what I was reading. The words were plain, legal, and cold. Embryo transfer authorization. Storage release. Secondary reproductive use. Spousal consent. Then the meaning found me slowly. 2 months after my miscarriage, when I was still sleeping with a heating pad and crying in grocery store aisles, someone had used my name to approve something at a fertility clinic. Not just something medical. Something intimate. Something that belonged inside the deepest private corner of my body, my marriage, and my future. The envelope also held a receipt from a clinic outside Las Vegas. Daniel had told me he was there for a finance seminar that weekend. I remembered packing his shirts, placing protein bars in his carry-on, and apologizing because I was too exhausted to drive him to the airport. I had apologized to him. That memory made me feel physically sick. I copied every page with my phone, then placed the originals back exactly where I found them. The attorney's warning stayed in my mind. Do not confront before you understand the whole structure. Do not let them know how much you have. Do not trade evidence for emotional relief. But emotional relief was all I wanted. I wanted to scream until the walls cracked. I wanted to call my mother and ask what kind of woman watches her daughter grieve while helping her husband build a secret child from stolen consent. I wanted to look Daniel in the face and see if there was still any human shame left in him. Instead, I locked the safe. Then I walked into the bathroom and threw up quietly with the shower running. By evening, Daniel came home with flowers. White roses, the kind he bought when he had done something ugly and wanted the house to smell innocent. He kissed my forehead, asked about my day, and acted like a man who still believed the stage was his. I smiled at him because my survival depended on becoming a better actress than my mother. That night, I waited until he fell asleep, then searched his old email archives from the desktop in his office. I used a password he thought I did not know. It was the name of his first dog, followed by our anniversary year, because men who lie about everything often stay lazy about the things that matter. At first, I found nothing. Then I searched the clinic name. One email appeared from 5 years earlier, hidden inside a folder labeled vendor receipts. It included travel details, clinic invoices, and a message thread between Daniel, my mother, and a woman named Marissa Cole. Marissa, the woman from La Jolla, the woman from Tempe. Ava's mother, or at least the woman raising her. The thread was careful, almost businesslike. Daniel discussed payments. Marissa asked about timing. My mother worried about my emotional state and whether I might start asking for medical records. Then one line stopped my breathing. Elaine confirmed Rachel still believes the pregnancy ended naturally. I read it again, but the words did not change. The pregnancy. Not my miscarriage. Not the loss. The pregnancy. Suddenly, the air in the office felt too thick to breathe. My mind ran backward through hospital rooms, pain medication, my mother's hand on my forehead, Daniel speaking softly to nurses outside the door. I had always believed my body failed me. I had carried that belief like a stone in my chest for 6 years. Now I wondered whether the stone had been handed to me on purpose. I sent the email thread to my secret account, then closed everything before Daniel woke up. My hands moved faster now, steadier now. The old Rachel would have begged for an explanation. The new Rachel understood that explanations were often just another room where liars locked you inside. The next morning, I drove to the hospital where I had lost the baby. I requested my records in person, using my driver's license and a voice so calm it did not sound like mine. The clerk told me some archived files would take time, but there was one note available immediately. She printed it, folded it into an envelope, and slid it across the counter without knowing she had just handed me the first loose thread of my old life. In the parking garage, I opened it under the yellow light. The doctor's note said I had declined genetic testing after the miscarriage. But beneath it, in a different line, was something else. A consent withdrawal form had been filed 3 days later, signed by Elaine Whitmore as authorized family representative. The words did not make sense at first. Authorized family representative. My mother had never been my authorized anything. Not in marriage. Not in medicine. Not after I turned 18 and signed my own forms. Yet there her name was, printed beneath a decision I did not remember making, tied to a pregnancy I had spent 6 years mourning alone. I sat in the parking garage with the paper across my lap while cars moved around me like normal life still existed. Somewhere above me, people were getting test results, holding newborns, paying bills, and walking out with ordinary worries. I could not move. I could barely blink. For years, I had believed my body had failed. Now I was staring at proof that people around me had handled my grief like paperwork. I drove straight to the attorney's office without calling first. The receptionist saw my face and did not ask me to wait long. When I handed over the hospital note, my attorney read it twice, then placed it carefully on the desk like it was dangerous. She did not promise revenge. She did not make it sound simple. She explained that forged consent, medical records, fertility documents, and financial transfers could become more than a divorce. They could become a criminal matter. But only if we moved carefully, preserved every record, and stopped letting Daniel and my mother control the timing. That word stayed with me. Timing. They had controlled mine for years. They chose when I doubted, when I rested, when I forgave, when I searched, and when I stopped searching. Even my grief had been scheduled around their convenience. By late afternoon, I opened a separate bank account, froze 2 credit cards, copied tax files, and changed passwords on every device I could still trust. I felt like I was packing myself out of a burning house one document at a time. There was no dramatic suitcase on the bed. No screaming in the driveway. Just quiet survival. That night, Daniel came home with takeout from my favorite Thai place. He watched me too closely while pretending not to. His kindness had become frightening because I finally understood its purpose. It was not love. It was anesthesia. My mother called 3 times, then sent messages about her blood pressure, her loneliness, and how families could be destroyed by one emotional mistake. I read every word without answering. For the first time, her guilt did not enter me. It stayed outside my skin. At midnight, I received a message from an unknown number. It included one photograph. Ava was asleep in a small pink bed, her cheek pressed against a stuffed rabbit. The gold bracelet was gone from her wrist. On the nightstand beside her was a folded note with my name written across it. Rachel. Below the photo, the sender had written that I deserved the truth before they erased everything. My heart started pounding so hard I heard it in my ears. The next message arrived before I could respond. It contained an address in Chandler and a time for the following morning. No explanation. No name. But I knew it was Marissa. Something in the carefulness felt like a woman who had also been managed, paid, and warned. I did not sleep. By sunrise, I was parked outside a quiet apartment complex with my secret phone in my lap and pepper spray in my purse. The air already felt hot, even that early. Sprinklers clicked across the grass. A school bus hissed at the corner. Everything looked too ordinary for the kind of truth waiting there. Marissa appeared from the second building, wearing jeans, sandals, and no sunglasses. Without them, she looked less like the polished woman from the photo and more like someone exhausted from carrying a secret too long. She did not approach my car right away. She looked around first, checking balconies, parked cars, and the street behind her. Then she placed a manila envelope on the passenger seat through the open window. Her hands were shaking. Inside were clinic forms, old photos, payment schedules, and copies of messages from Daniel. There was also a birth certificate for Ava Rose Miller. Father listed as Daniel Miller. Mother listed as Marissa Cole. But beneath it was another document. A private genetic report. I opened it slowly, already afraid of what my body seemed to know before my mind did. The report showed Ava was biologically Daniel's daughter. And mine. For several seconds, I could not feel my hands. The genetic report rested on my lap, but it felt heavier than paper. Ava was Daniel's daughter. Ava was Marissa's child in every daily way that mattered. But biologically, she was mine too. My body had not only been lied about. Something had been taken from it, carried into another woman's life, and hidden behind money, guilt, and my mother's quiet smile. Marissa did not stay long. She left the envelope and walked back toward the apartment with her shoulders tight and her head lowered. I watched her disappear through the breezeway, and for the first time, I did not see her as the villain of my life. I saw another woman Daniel had cornered with promises, contracts, pressure, and money. She had Ava. I had the truth. Neither of us had been free. I drove to my attorney's office with the envelope on the seat beside me. By noon, everything changed. The divorce filing went in first. Then the emergency motions. Then the preservation letters to the clinic, the hospital, Daniel's firm, my mother's bank, and every device connected to our cloud. My attorney did not let me call Daniel. She did not let me call my mother. She told me silence was no longer weakness if it was protecting evidence. That sentence stayed with me for days. Silence had been used against me for years. Now, for the first time, I used it for myself. Daniel came home that evening and found his key no longer worked. I watched him through the security camera, standing on the porch with flowers in one hand and anger already forming in his jaw. He called me 26 times. My mother called 14. I answered none of them. By the next week, the story they built began cracking. The clinic records showed forged consent forms. The hospital archive showed my mother had signed documents she was never allowed to sign. Bank records showed Daniel paid her in smaller amounts for years before the final transfer. The $300,000 had not been generosity. It was a closing payment. A reward for keeping me managed after Marissa threatened to tell me Ava's origin. The bracelet hurt most. My mother had given it to Marissa after Ava's birth, telling her it came with my blessing. A family heirloom for a family I supposedly wanted to keep private. That lie was so intimate, so cruel, that it took my breath differently than the money. She had taken my grandmother's memory and used it as a costume for betrayal. When I finally saw my mother again, it was in a lawyer's conference room. She looked smaller than I remembered. Her hair was carefully styled, her lipstick perfect, her hands folded like she was waiting for church to begin. But I no longer saw the woman who could calm me with one touch. I saw someone who had confused control with love for so long that she no longer knew the difference. She cried. Daniel raged. Their attorneys spoke for them. I mostly sat still. There was no single sentence that could repair what they had done. No apology could give back the years I spent blaming my instincts, my body, and my grief. Some betrayals do not explode. They are built slowly, one quiet manipulation at a time, until you wake up inside a life that was designed to keep you blind. The legal process stretched for months. Daniel lost the house before he lost his confidence. My mother sold hers to repay money she claimed she had only accepted out of fear. The clinic came under investigation, and the hospital opened a review that arrived far too late for the woman I had been 6 years earlier. Marissa kept custody of Ava because Ava was not evidence. She was a child, and no matter what was stolen from me, I refused to steal peace from her. I met Ava once in a park in Chandler. She had Daniel's eyes and my grandmother's smile, which nearly broke me in half. She gave me a drawing with a crooked yellow sun, then ran back to Marissa without knowing my name meant anything yet. I cried in my car afterward, not from weakness, but from the strange ache of loving someone from a distance. I live in a smaller house now. There is no pool, no matching Christmas photo, no husband explaining late meetings. My mother sends letters I do not open. Daniel sends messages through lawyers. The bracelet is back in my jewelry box, but I rarely wear it. Some things can be recovered and still never feel the same. I used to think family meant closing your eyes to protect what you loved. Now I know real love does not ask you to go blind. It does not make you doubt your own pain. It does not buy silence and call it peace. And sometimes, the first honest life you ever live begins the moment you stop protecting the people who betrayed you.